Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. I'm Julia Stanford. I'm the Programs and Operations Manager at Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts. I'm pretty sure most of you know who I am already, but we did have a few new faces on our registration list. So you are at a webinar of TAGD, Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts. As a quick reminder, we work hard to bring you webinars, speaker series that are business meetings, lots of educational opportunities like that, our GCD boot camps, which we had one a few weeks ago, and of course the Texas Groundwater Summit, which happens in late August, where we hope to see you all soon. Before I introduce our speaker for today, I'll briefly go over just a few technical reminders. We have about 40 people registered for today, and this is GoToWebinar. So the webinar format doesn't allow for audience cameras, and so you'll all stay muted and off camera. If you have any questions during this presentation, you can type them into the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel. Keep in mind that is not a chat function between participants. That stuff just goes to us. So that's where you'll put any questions, as well as if you are having any technical issues, if audio suddenly goes out or something crazy, or Joel's doing crazy stuff with his camera. And then later at the end, if you have a more detailed question and you need to engage in a dialogue, use the little hand raise function. But for the most part, we're going to keep questions to, we'll hold them until the end. So just type them in the box and we'll verbalize them when it's appropriate. This webinar is being recorded, and so we'll send out the recording and the presentation slides. So you can all refer to it, share it with your board, share it with the other staff members. And so at this time, I will stop talking and I'll introduce our esteemed speaker. He says we don't need to introduce him because everyone already knows him. And a lot of you probably do. He's been around for a while. So we are excited to bring Joel Pigg of Texas Well Owner Network to bringing you some knowledge on this webinar today. We're excited to bring him to you to bring knowledge, of course. He is the coordinator for the Texas Well Owner Network, and before that, he served as the general manager for Real Edwards Conservation and Reclamation District since 2011. And since moving over to T1, he is still serving as the consulting manager for that district. So he's got a great perspective from both the district side and the Texas Well Owner Network side that I think everyone will really find enlightening. He knows districts, he knows what districts need. So I'll let Joel take over now and I'll chime in at the end with my questions. So with that, thank you so much for being here, Joel. Welcome.
Thank you, Julia. So without any further ado, we will get started. Again, I am with the Texas Well Owner Network and based in College Station, but the Texas Well Owner Network program is a statewide program through AgriLife Extension. So we go wherever we are needed, wherever we're wanted. So we do have limited budget as everyone else has. So if you would like a program to come to your district, to your area, let us know and we will start working on getting that to happen in the future. So without that, without y'all's support and without y'all's help, we cannot do this program. We have made great strides and I think we've got a very successful program moving across the state. So to keep with what Julia and Leah are wanting us to do, okay, background for the Texas Well Owner Network, or background of private wells across the state of Texas. As y'all probably know, just a little refresher here, over 1 million private wells across the state, 2.2 million Texans in rural areas and those living on small acreages rely on these private wells for their drinking water supply. About 10% of the total population and 20% of the population living outside of city limits drink private well water. And of those wells that we've got in our area, our districts, 2 to 50% typically exceed maximum contaminant level on nitrates. And a lot of that is depending on your region. We're going to talk about a few of the problems that I do see with water wells across the state. Okay, so the Texas Well Owner Network program goals. We want to change the knowledge, awareness, attitude, and actions of private well managers. We want to improve private well management to safeguard the homeowners' health and protect water resources. As y'all know, it'll be preached to the choir here, but TCQ checks on all municipal, all public water supply systems. No one is going property to property to check on these private water wells. Most of the time, whenever I do a program, I do ask the question of when was the last time you checked your private well for bacteria, for nitrates, any kind of well test. Most common answer that I do receive is I've never checked it. It still tastes as good as the day I drilled the well. That's been 20, 25 years ago, and I didn't see a need to check it, so I've never done it. So most common answer is you will probably receive in your districts is when was the last time you checked your well or water quality in your well, and never will be the most popular #1 answer. Okay, Well Owner Network was established in 2011. We've had over 10,400 participants in workshops across the state, over 200 events covering 180 of your 254 counties in Texas. You can see the map there on the bottom left. The red dots are for the well-informed of the 1 hour program. Typically John Smith that works with me does that program. The blue dots are our 4 hour or a half day program. So I am typically the one that does that along with Ryan Gerlich that covers the septic portion of our program. Diane Belstorff was here and retired from the program, and John Smith has taken over the water quality, water treatment section. So most likely you'll see me and John for a majority of the programs. And again, Ryan Gerlich out of Biological Ag Engineering here on campus is our septic expert that is involved with this program. You'll notice there on the right-hand side of the screen some of the publications that we do have that we take to programs that are on the website. Private Water Well Basics is a very popular one. It has just recently been updated. Coliform bacteria has also been recently updated. The petroleum products, it's just one that we've got. Plugging the wells, and we've also got another one for capping wells. So those are very popular that we go to run through a lot of those, as well as hydrogen sulfide and nitrates and shot chlorination. Those are probably our top 2 or 3 that we get out to districts or to programs. Okay, again, T1 has 2 educational trainings type programs. The Well Educated is a 4-hour training. We start off that one with about an hour on water well basics, aquifer basics. Then we go into a little over an hour on septic, and then we close that one with water quality and water treatment issues. We also have a little small portion that talks about the plugging or capping of abandoned wells. We do have water screening involved in this program. Typically what we're going to do on a well-educated and the well-informed programs is whenever we schedule a program with you, we're going to do 2 days. First day is going to be, we're going to come in, collect water samples, get those things screened for the nitrates, for TDS, and for bacteria, and it takes us 24 hours to incubate those bacteria samples. So therefore, we like to be able to present at our educational meeting the results of the water screening. We call it screening because we are not a certified lab. We are very movable, transportable, as everyone that has had a program with us knows. We carry incubators, 4, 5, 6 incubators with us in the back of the vehicle we're traveling in, as well as the other testing equipment. So we are really mobile and can get to your locations wherever you're at. We, during COVID, they shut us down and wouldn't let us travel around the state, but as soon as they opened the floodgates and let us out, we did trips to far west Texas and hit Brewster, Jeff Davis, Culberson, Hudspeth, a bunch of those counties out there with some lower populations, but with lots of private water wells. We also hit the Metroplex area whenever they let us get out of here. So when we got out of the office, we were ready to hit the road and get some sampling done. The Well Informed program is a 1-hour educational that talks about wellhead safety. It is a water sample campaign, first and foremost. Again, nitrates, bacterias, and the TDS are the main things that we are looking at. Certain areas across the state, we will look at arsenic. If out in Presidio County, down in South Texas, in that Star, Jim Hogg, Brooks, Jim Wells, Duval, we've got lots of arsenic issues in the soil there. Midland, Odessa, we've got some arsenic issues. So depending on your area, the region, we will do arsenic screening as well. So we will go anywhere in the state. I'll tell you that one of my goals, having come out of the groundwater district world and knowing what a great job you folks with the groundwater districts do, my key audiences in a lot of areas are those white counties that are not on the groundwater district map that don't have any of your expertise in that county. So I'm trying to push to get programs to those white counties so we can make sure that at least once they do hear the message that we are trying to get out. Okay, again, well-informed, 1 hour program, E. coli, bacteria, nitrates, TDS, arsenic is location-driven. Educational program, explanation of results is the main part of this thing. Wellhead protection, simulate initial interest and responsibilities. For you folks that have not had a program with us, when we do schedule a program, we're going to talk with you and your county extension counterpart. Main thing we need from your office and their office are places to drop off samples, places to collect samples, and we will provide you with a flyer and a press release for the program. So limited paperwork on y'all's part except for collection or passing out testing materials, which would include the bottles, bags, collection instructions, and the information sheet, collecting those things back into the office and being able to possibly help us with the screening process to get those samples taken care of. Okay, general information here. I'm sure this is going to be preaching to the choir, a lot of it, but this is the take-home message that I give to participants that come into our well programs. We want to make sure that they do know information about that well. We want them to record those locations with GPS, which will certainly help out you in the district. I know in our district, as remote as we were, finding some of these wells out on some of the ranches was very difficult, but if we had GPS locations, we could easily find those wells. We want to make sure that folks do have well logs that go with their private wells. You'd be surprised at how many people don't know what a well log is, have never heard of it, never seen it, don't have a clue where to find it. Drillers in many parts of the state do not do a good job getting those well logs out to the participants. The question I ask people, or statement I make at most of my meetings, is I ask them, what is the best thing that well drillers do? And we all know that well drillers can drill a hole. What's the worst thing that well drillers do is any kind of paperwork. And we all have been there and know that there's certain drillers that do paperwork and will keep up with stuff. There's other ones that's like pulling teeth to get any kind of paperwork from them. Has to be a cold, wet day before they're going to sit in the office and do that paperwork. But they know what the rules are. We expect them to follow. Okay, registration or permit with the Groundwater Conservation District. We always make sure that people know that they need to talk with a district if there is one in their county, in their area. Talk to y'all first because y'all can give them information about what the aquifer looks like in your particular area, what the common depth of a well is, what your common volume of wells are. We realize that it changes from location to location, from spot to spot, but if somebody's moving to Real County from Houston and they ask us what a well is, you know, we can give them generalities for Real County and tell them what's going on where they would not know that, and that kind of gives them a little bit of wiggle room to know if they can afford that, what they know that they need to be spending money for, what the common depth of a well, what the common volume is, and if it's going to be cost prohibitive or make it worth for their time. Okay, a well log, y'all know what that is. It has a well number on it, has the owner and location information up in the top. Top center has the owner information, also has those GPS coordinates to the right-hand side. On the second page, it's going to have the driller information, what's going on with those companies and making sure that they are licensed. Always stress that with our people that come to the programs. We also give them, or the well log tells them, well testing information. It gives us that geologic formation. So again, one of the messages I give to people is, even if you have a well log in your hand, realize that the yield on this well, on this particular screen now, says it's 100 and something gallons per minute. Remember, over time, with more and more wells being drilled in Texas, those numbers do drop. If you're very fortunate if your well yield will hold true over several years. We realize that over time, especially in the hill country, with the limestone formations, that those screens do get clogged. The amount of water going into the column does decrease over time. So just because you had a 20 gallon per minute well the day it was drilled does not necessarily mean it's going to be that. Over time, it will degrade and the volume will decrease. Okay, Well seating regulations, I know this is different from district to district, but these are TDLR regulations that we talk about. We want to make sure we are 50 feet from septic tank, cistern, property boundary, non-potable water. Okay, common sense question I'm going to ask y'all that I ask whenever I do my program. If you're in the hill country, if you're not in West Texas, most locations have a little bit of slope and a little bit of topography to their land. Do you want to put that well on the highest point of your property, or do you want to put the septic on the highest point of your property? Remember that things do flow downhill. We're not going to say what, but things flow downhill. So me, typically speaking, I would want my well a little bit higher than my septic tank, just for the problem if my septic backed up, I do not want it running downhill and possibly contaminating my well. Okay, next thing is we want to make sure that we are 100 feet from our septic drain fields or leach fields. So again, the well on the higher point, our spray area, drain field, 100 feet away, preferably downhill. Okay, we want to make sure that we are 150 feet from our pet shelters, livestock yards, feed storage, pesticide storage, fertilizer storage. I'm going to show you a picture here in just a few minutes of a well house that has got many of these problems with it. So, you know, we all have the little well house. We've also got a barn on our property most of the time if we're in a rural landscape. So feed, pesticides, fertilizers need to be in the barn, not the well house. Okay, groundwater in Texas. Groundwater supply is about 60% of the water that's used across the state. About 80% of the groundwater is used for irrigation purposes, and about 36% of the water is used by municipalities is from our groundwater sources, which is you guys. Okay, anybody got a well that looks like this in their county? Anybody want to confess to it if it's on their property? Okay, major problem here is we get in there a little bit tighter. We do not have an airtight seal at the surface or ground surface. So if this is in a place that's prone to flooding, every time we have just a little bit of rainfall and have a little bit of water rise, we have the capability or the possibility of there being flooding damage and contamination issues. If we've got that gap in between our casing and our cap, the width of a brick, so a couple of inches, we have the possibility of bugs, mice, snakes, anything that crawls on the ground has a possibility of crawling over the lip of that well casing and falling down into our well, therefore contaminating it. So not a proper well seal here. This was taken, I think John took this picture somewhere here in the state of Texas. So if you know the proper or the TDLR laws for well completion, how many of this one, or how many errors, mistakes do you see in this one picture? Several. Okay, anybody see a problem with this? The way I envisioned this was probably a hand dug well, very large circumference, probably 3 or 4 feet across there. Looks like they probably backfilled it some, put a piece of casing down into it. Doesn't look like it's plumbed at this point, but the question I'm going to ask you that I ask in my meetings is, how long does a piece of plywood laying on the ground in Texas, anywhere, how long is it going to last before it's rotted or goes away? The other question is, how many of y'all have kids or pets that see this thing and say, oh wow, let's play fort? So they're running through the backyard, jump off the grass, hit that piece of plywood that's been in the yard for a couple of years, hand dug well, we know that's more than a foot deep. So 15, 20, 30, 50 foot deep, and boom, somebody lands on that piece of plywood. They're in the bottom of the hole. Luckily enough, or maybe not lucky, but fortunately, this could be a larger diameter well, hand dug, so you could get somebody out of it. We all know the baby Jessica story. So a piece of casing that's that size, a child, a small pet could fall down that. And the other thing I see with this well is cinder block. Is that a proper cap or plug for a well? Okay, why does construction matter? Poor construction can affect the drinking water quality. As we all know, poor construction can contribute to groundwater pollution. Proper construction can prolong the life and yield of the well and protect the groundwater quality. Okay, so the picture here that you see, a story that goes along with that is pump went out on this well. They called the company out to pull the well, get that pump out, replace it. Whenever the rig backed up to it, tied onto the pipe, gave it a little jerk, everything came out of the ground. So is that a problem? Most likely, yes. First and foremost, I don't see the annular cement, that 10 feet of cement that's supposed to hold the casing into the ground. I do see the maybe 1 foot of casing coming out of the ground. The concrete slab around that casing is not of proper dimensions, but the main thing is the annular cement is not there. So whenever they gave that thing a little tug, everything came out of the ground, and we don't know what kind of damage it did underneath the ground. So proper completion does make a difference. Proper completion can keep and prolong that well life. Okay, maintenance tips that I'm going to talk about that we give to all of the people that come to our meetings is find a well log. Get that thing, put it in a folder there at the house. Any kind of well test that you get done with with T1, when we come in and do a program, we do give everybody a result sheet for them to take home with them. It tells them what we saw on that particular date with the well sample that they brought. One thing that I do encourage people to do when they bring a water test to us is I want them to take a sample directly from the well, the closest faucet, closest spigot to the well. I also encourage folks to bring a sample past all of their filtration systems if they've got it, to make sure that the filtration is doing what we think it's doing. I have seen more positive bacteria after a filter than I have seen prior to a filter, because people don't maintain that system correctly, or they forgot to change the filter, they forgot to backwash it. So some of those filter media are great places for bacterial growth. So one thing I would do if I've got lab capabilities in my district is encourage people to take a sample at the well and probably take a sample after your filtration system, just to make sure everything is good. Just because the well is good does not mean it's good at the faucet in the house. So it's always good to encourage folks to take 2 samples and make sure we don't have bacteria issues. Okay, we also want to have in our folder maintenance and repair information. Anytime we replace the pump, anytime we have electrical work, we want to make sure that we document that. We want to keep it in the folder. People that come to the T1 programs are typically not the 20 and 21-year-olds. It's the 65 and 70-year-olds that are doing it. So as I look across the crowd, the thing I tell them is, you're not going to own this property forever. At some point, you're going to sell, or you're going to give the kids, the grandkids, your property in a deed or in your will. So make sure that you do leave well logs, water testing information, maintenance information for those kids, for those new buyers, because that's something that you don't need if you sell the property. If you give it to the kids and you move to town and leave the ranch or whatever you're doing, leave the well information there at the ranch house, at the well, so that people have that. You don't need to move with it because it's not going to do you any good. But how many, as a district manager, how many people come in and say, I just bought this property, I know nothing about this well, so we have to dig up well logs and try to find information for them. And we know that the previous well owner could have left that stuff with the house, with the well, and it would have been so much easier. You know, we know information about the cable TV, about the electric, and about the phone. So let's leave well stuff with the house, and right there on the bar whenever you move out, because it would just be so nice to have that information for those new owners. Okay, we want to make sure that we're not using or storing fertilizers, pesticides, oils, paints around the well. You can see that bottom right-hand picture. That well house is all kinds of concerns for me, all kinds of major issues. If you'll see right there, kind of in the center to the left, you'll see the wellhead there. You'll see 12 inches of casing coming out of the ground, but you see the gas can on top of a plastic bag that looks a little sketchy. You see a pump up sprayer there. You see paint cans. My problem in Texas is, as bipolar as our weather is, we could have an issue where this morning it is 20 degrees, this afternoon it's 80 degrees, and during those temperature swings that we're having, we've got every bug, every rat, every snake looking for a warm, dry place. And I don't know about you guys, but if I'm a snake, I'm going to look for me a nice place underneath that bag or underneath those chairs to hide out. And if some poor unsuspecting human comes in and disrupts me, it's going to be crazy, because that guy's going to be trying to get out of there. Me, I don't like snakes, so if he starts slithering out of me, I'm probably gonna break something trying to get out of that well house from him. Okay, you notice on the picture on the top, we show a picture of somebody spraying, and then we've got the big red X. Okay, we don't want to make sure that, or we want to make sure that we don't super saturate the area around that wellhead. It looks like there's a little bit of an air gap on our plug there from our casing to our cap. So don't super saturate it, but keep the grass and keep things away from it. Weed eat it a little bit, spray a little Roundup if you have to. Don't saturate it. Read and follow the spray directions, but keep things away from it. Keep those fire ants away from the well casing. Keep them away from our controller boxes, wherever our switches are at. We know that wasps and fire ants love electricity, so always be cautious and cognizant of critters whenever you're around your well, because they do like that electric, they do like that warm, especially in the winter. So keep that area around the well clean and accessible. Make it easy on yourself. Conduct monthly thorough visual inspections for cracks in the cap, soil disturbances, flooding, damage. It's always easier to fix damage or prevent damage instead of fix it. I know we all had problems back during Snowmageddon a couple of years ago where we had busted water lines. If we would have wrapped those pipes, we would have put the heat lamps, we might have kept some of that from happening, not all of it, but it's a lot easier to prevent those disturbances than it is to go back and fix water lines in the cold. I don't like to be cold and wet, so that was not a good time. Okay, every so often, 5 to 10 years, we do need a licensed professional to come in and fix some of the stuff that we may have done. The other joke I've got, or statement I make during all of our programs is, whenever that Snowmageddon hit, the wife said, go out and fix the water lines, give me water back to the house. We got to flush the toilets. We got to take a bath. We need laundry. So me being the person that I am, the Aggie engineer that I am, went into the barn, got every PVC fitting I had. We put everything back together, and it looks like an Aggie engineer put it together. There's valves and current turns and things that probably should not be there, but everything works. So every so often, we need to get a professional in there to cut away the mess that we have made and properly fix things up to code. I know in some of these counties, there's not much code, but you know, if we don't need a valve there, we don't need that extra piece of pipe, let's get rid of it and let's make sure everything is working properly. So again, when you sell that property, you give it to the kids, the grandkids, everything does work and it all makes sense. It's not that engineering that we did that makes sense only in our mind. Okay, EPA drinking water standards are what we're looking at whenever we go do a program. We're looking at the MCL or maximum contaminant level. They posed risk to human health. There's over 80 contaminants, but the ones that we look at, the easy ones to for us to test or to screen for, nitrates, E. coli, arsenic, and again, we look at TDS as well, but that's really not a drinking water problem. So secondary standards are contaminant levels that are aesthetic considerations, anything that has to do with taste, color, odor. Things that we think of whenever we look at those secondary standards are irons, hydrogen sulfides, and the TDS. So anybody that's got the rotten egg smell, the hydrogen sulfide is the thing we look at. If you've got a little discoloration, either brown, red, orange, that could be iron possibly there. TDS is very high across the state of Texas. We did some work 2 or 3 weeks ago in South Texas. I think the average TDS level in about 300 samples was roughly 13 to 1500 parts per million. And as humans, you know, we don't like anything above about 500. It starts tasting salty and it's not something that we want to utilize very much. So South Texas has some very, very high TDS water. Okay, how often should we test wells? We recommend annually for bacterias, especially those coliforms and E. coli's, every few years for the general chemistry such as the nitrates and TDS or the salts, and as frequently as needed for other contaminants of concern. The statement we made a while ago, if you see a change in color, odor, taste of your private water well, we recommend that you get it tested, and I would test for bacterias and just the general chemistry nitrate salts. So anytime we see changes in color, odor, taste, let's go ahead and tell folks to get those things tested. If you want general chemistry of your well, a good place to send a relatively inexpensive sample is to the Soil, Water, and Forage Testing Lab here on campus at A&M, probably for $30 to $40. And if you do the heavy metals, up to $75. You can get everything tested except for bacteria. So general chemistry, kind of like whenever you do a soil test, this water test that they're going to do will tell you turf usage and probably garden usage and pasture usage. So I would recommend that on occasion that you tell folks to send a general sample to the lab here in College Station. It's not one that has to be refrigerated. It just needs to show up to the guys at the lab. So a good place to get general chemistry information, especially if you're having problems with your garden. Soil's good, but we still have a limiting factor, possibly could be our water supply. Okay, how much will it cost to get these samples taken? If you go to a local health lab or go through the, probably not your conservation district, but health labs and health and labs that are certified, it's probably going to be probably in that $30 range. Whenever we do our program, we charge $15 a sample to come in. And I'll tell you what's really funny is we could do our programs for free and people don't trust our numbers as much as if they have to charge a little fee for it. So keep that in mind in your locality. We know a lot of y'all are taxing entities, so this is one of the services you offer, which is a great deal. But for us, we've determined over time that when people have a little skin in the game, they're more apt to come back for the educational program and they believe the results more than if we give them a free test, which is kind of crazy, but that's the way it works. Okay, how to find a lab? Drinking water testing, county health departments, river authorities do have those labs. There is a list of NELAC certified labs on the TCEQ website. If you follow this website, it will show you a list. Problem with that list is it is labs across the United States and it is alphabetical by name. It's not, and you really can't change the way you search through it. So you have to go through it line by line, lab by lab to find the ones that are close to your area. If you're needing an area, Houston, DFW, San Antonio area, shoot me an email and I will send you one. I think I've got it broke down to those local localities because I go through this pretty regular. So if you have questions about labs, definitely reach out to me. Okay, why do we want to check for fecal coliform? It's an indicator bacteria. It indicates disease risk from other organisms that are pathogenic. It's a very cost effective. The picture you see there on the top, on the right, that is the test that John, whenever they first started the T1 program, that's the test that they did. And they actually counted those spots in the bacteria just to see what was going on. We've got a little more cost effective and a little easier test now. It is the 150 milliliter bottles. We fill it up with 100 milliliters of water and then put the bacteria, the color into the bottles and incubate for 24 hours. It's an absence presence test that we're doing. If we see, if the water goes from the clear water color, whenever we put this food in there, to a yellow color, we do know that there is a presence of bacteria. To check for the absence or presence of the E. coli specifically, we put the sample in front of a black light. If it fluoresces, you will notice then that it is a positive for E. coli. So it's a very simple process. We feel very comfortable with it. Like I say, we've done over 10,000 samples. We do recommend though, if you do get a positive for E. coli bacteria, that you do a treatment option and then you go ahead and retest it to make sure that we have taken care of that problem. Coliform bacteria, we see it a lot, especially in the drought years. So the drier the year is, the higher the number of coliform positives I see. We don't say that you have to do a test on those things, just continually monitor your well, your water supply, again, for that color, odor, taste to make sure nothing is changing. So that is what we would, maximum contaminant level, for E. coli bacteria is 0. We do not want any E. coli bacteria in that private well. So our recommendation is if we see a positive there, we do a treatment and we do not utilize that water for drinking until after we have done a treatment process. Okay, fecal coliform is a microscopic organism found in the feces of humans and other warm-blooded animals. They are not harmful by themselves, but they are indicator organisms indicating the presence of pathogenic bacteria, viruses, parasites. The fecal coliform E. coli are very easily tested for. And again, that's the test that we do, we screen for. And again, it turns from water, if it does turn a color of yellow or orange, then it does mean that that bacteria or that E. coli is present. If we have the fluorescence, then the E. coli is present. So it's pretty simple test. If you have questions about that, do reach out to me. There's quite a few labs. I think I asked Julia before we started a while ago, how many districts do have testing procedures or have this kind of equipment in their office? Somewhere in that 20 to 25 range do have incubators and do this test similar. Probably most of y'all are using the test strips for the nitrates, so very similar to the process that we're using with the T1 program. Okay, sources of bacteria. We as humans are one of the major contributors. Again, we want to make sure that our well is 50 feet separation from our septic tank. Downhill, we want to make sure we're 100 feet minimum separation from our drain or spray fields. Downhill, livestock sources, 150 feet minimum separation downslope from our well. And our good friends, I've got a picture in one of my slide presentations that this guy right here is actually on a leash tied to a wellhead. So guys, we don't want the dog tied to the well because for obvious reasons, they can have the well I think he's tied to is a well that's not in use. And I don't think it has a proper cap or a proper plug on it. So we got a little male dog here doing his business on the well. What do you think's doing, going down into our well? And hopefully that picture, the well that we're using for the house, hopefully it is uphill from the well that he's tied to. Okay, make sure that the pets and dogs, cats, goats, whatever it is, 150 feet minimum separation from the pens, yards, and runs. Okay, septic systems. Most likely, if you've got a private water well on your property, that you will have some sort of septic system. So just basic minimum septics that we as water districts need to remember to talk about is inspect those systems annually, pump out the septic system every 3 to 5 years or as needed. If there's 2 people living in a house, it may be 5 to 7 years. If there's a family of 6 living in there, it may be every 2 to 3. So we need to know what's going on with that septic system, make sure that we do maintain it properly. We want to make sure we avoid and reduce the use of our garbage disposals. Not everything we have needs to go down the garbage disposal. We want to minimize the volume of household water to be treated. Ryan tells us whenever he does his talk is don't use a day of the week for laundry because that turns your septic into a white water rapid because we're putting so much fresh water or clean water down there, not the septic water. So if in your communities it is allowable, you might want to put the discharge from your washing machine into the yard to water the trees or the flower beds or the garden, wherever it needs to go, but maybe not into the septic. So minimize that white water rapid effect. Do not dump paints, chemicals into the drains or toilets. Make sure that those things are disposed of, but not down septics. Okay. Also, make sure we protect the drain field from damage. We don't want to use the drain field as our parking lot, as the garden area. That water going through the septic has not been purified. It's not water that we want to utilize for our gardens. It has not been properly treated and gone through the whole process. Drain fields are there for a reason. We put the tractors on it, we put the cars on it, we do crush those lines and therefore making the septic field, leach field inoperable. So make sure that we are cognizant of where that's at and what it's utilized for. Okay, separation 50 feet from our tank, 100 feet from our drainer spray field. Okay, nitrates. Methemoglobinemia or blue baby syndrome will tie up the oxygen in the blood supply, therefore giving those children, those pregnant nursing women, infants, elderly with suppressed immune systems, they will have a blue tinge to their skin because that oxygen is being tied up within the bloodstream. So nitrates do come from natural sources, from fertilizers, from animal waste, sewage. So you see here a few pictures of where this stuff comes from. Treatment for nitrates would be reverse osmosis, ion exchange, distillation. So a few things that can be done. A lot of these things are point of use, not a whole house type system. So keep that in mind. The test strips that we use for nitrates, maximum contaminant level is 10 parts per million. We do see many instances where the pinkness of that test strip is there on the 50 range, on the high side of that. So we do see a probably 20 to 30% of the samples that we see do show higher levels at or above the maximum contaminant level of 10. So watch out, especially if you're in some of those higher agriculture use portions of the state where there's fertilizers being put out. Just be cognizant of it. Okay, sources of nitrates, again, we as humans are one of the biggest culprits. Maintain those separations. Fertilizers is another. It's like I say, in those higher agriculture type natures. We don't see it so much, probably more so in the row crops than in our pastures, but I would say that nitrate levels have reduced over the last several years as the fertilizer prices have increased. Nitrates in some of the agriculture places that we go, where we saw high nitrate levels in the past, they're starting to stabilize and go down now because fertilizer costs have gone out the roof and people can't afford to put as much fertilizer. Okay, TDS, or the total dissolved solids, level of minerals, including salts. Anything more than about 500 parts per million tastes salty to us as humans. Here in College Station, I think the TDS is about 480 from our tap water. So we're right there on the verge. A lot of people move from anywhere else in the state of Texas, move into College Station and hate the water here because it does not taste good for them. I'll tell you, I love living out in Lakey, out there in the hill country, because we had such nice hard water. We didn't ever have to exfoliate, because if you just take a shower in Lakey, Texas, you exfoliate all you need to. You move to College Station, the water is so soft here, you can never take a shower long enough to get all the soap off of you. So, you know, if you want exfoliation, move to the hill country. If you want soft water, College Station is your place to go. Sodium is often referred to as a measure of salinity, most common cause of high TDS in Texas. Okay, you'll see the salinity tolerances of plants, 0 to 175, excellent, no risk to our plants. 175 to 525, not good for sensitive plants. Sensitive includes some of the, like tomatoes, melon, some of those things. You start getting salinity in that water, those plants do not grow as much. So if you're wondering why your tomatoes, mainly anywhere in the state of Texas, probably why your tomatoes don't do very well, it could be the salinity in your groundwater supply being in that 175 to 525 or higher range, and it just is not conducive to those plants to grow. Okay, salinity tolerances for our animals, 0 to 3,000. So livestock has a much greater tolerance of salinity than we do. 0 to 3,000 is good for all livestock. 3 to 5, 6,000 is satisfactory. They start getting up in that 5 to 7,000 range, and they really don't like it. Not good for lactating animals. Thing I do tell folks in that South Texas bunch that we talked to a couple of weeks ago, whenever you're putting out mineral salt blocks, a lot of places out there, if you've got that 1,500 to 3,000 of your salinity, you could reduce that cost and not put your mineral blocks out, because they're getting what they need out of the water supply. Okay, this one does not apply to everyone that's in the call, I'm assuming, but arsenic is one of the issues that we have seen across the state. Again, South Texas has an arsenic pocket, Midland, Odessa has a pocket, and out towards Presidio, there's some issues. The EPA has lowered the maximum contaminant level of arsenic from 50 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion. And folks, I did see some 100s and 500s in the sample set that we took from South Texas a couple of weeks ago. So really concerning, some of the stuff off the charts. We've never seen levels, or I've never seen levels at that capacity before. So just kind of serious health risk can occur: skin problems, high blood pressure, circulatory failure, diabetes issues, nervous system problems, and it can cause cancer, lungs, bladder, kidney, or liver. So if you think you've got arsenic in your area, we've got some publications on the Well Owner Network website that shows a map of Texas and shows where those arsenic levels are at. So get on that map. I think there's actually some a little bit above Midland, Odessa towards Andrews, Gaines County. So some of those in the far end of the South Plains. Okay, what can a well owner do if they have arsenic issues? Main thing we would tell them is try to drill another well and see if there's a better location. Connect to a public water supply that has to take care of that, or bottled water is always an option. Treatment for arsenic is very similar to what it was for the nitrates: reverse osmosis, distillation, ion exchange. So those are a couple of the treatment options. Again, those would be more point of use, not whole household systems. Those whole household gets into numbers that most homeowners don't want to spend to take these contaminants out of their water supply. Okay, hydrogen sulfide, colorless gas with the rotten egg odor. Many locations across the state, formed by sulfur reducing bacteria that can occur naturally in the groundwater. Is common in shallow or poorly constructed wells that are drilled in shale, sandstone, or near coal or oil fields. So again, many portions of the state of Texas. Okay, if the smell is only from the hot water faucet, the problem could be with our hot water heater, the diodes that are the heating elements in there, and those can be changed. Ensure that the water heater is set according to manufacturer's recommendation. If you turn the heat up a little bit, it will help. But if you've got small children, scalding could be an issue, so we may not want to raise that temperature. There may be a chemical reaction with the magnesium control rod, the anode, so we might change that rod out to a zinc rod. We could possibly consider a tankless water heater so that we don't have that water sitting there and fermenting. So tankless is maybe a direct use, so maybe a solution that we could look at. If the smell is coming from both hot and cold faucets, but only from water treated by the water softener and not in the untreated water, problem is sulfur bacteria in the water softener. Again, the problem I was talking about a while ago, a lot of our treatment options, if not maintained properly, do cause issues that our water coming straight from the well does not have. So we need to make sure that any kind of water softener or treatment system is properly maintained. Hydrogen sulfide, if the smell is strong when the water in both the hot and cold faucets is first turned on, becomes weaker as the water has run, or if the smell varies over time, the problem is sulfur bacteria in the well or the plumbing systems. So we might need to figure out a way to get a little air to our system into our pressure tank and let that hydrogen sulfide have a chance to dissipate. Okay, iron and magnesium. It's a nuisance, can give water an unpleasant taste, odor, color. Iron has the secondary maximum contaminant level. Iron is 0.03 milligrams per liter. Magnesium 0.05 milligrams per liter. They stain. Iron is a reddish brown. Manganese is a brownish to black. Stains on concrete, glassware, laundry, porcelain, sinks, plumbing fixtures. So you can see that the porcelain we don't want to have that red or brown in the bottom of it. It looks like it's not clean, but it may just be stuff coming out of our water and everything is totally clean and fixed the way we need it to. But our wives or you ladies do not want that coloration in your white porcelain. We like the white to be white. Okay, what to test for nearby land use for if we suspect or observe problems such as landfills. Our TDS, our pH, heavy metals may be things that we want to look at. Again, those are things that you can send to the soil and water testing lab here at A&M. They can test for those heavy metals for you. They can look at that TDS and see where it's coming from. Septic system failure. The lab here does not test for coliform or E. coli bacteria. So you would have to find a health department lab there in your locale to get that test done. So it may take a little bit of digging on your part to figure out proper source or proper location to send your samples to. Okay, if we have the stains on fixtures or plumbing, symptoms could be the iron manganese, iron bacteria, hardness, the odor, rotten egg is typically going to be hydrogen sulfide. If we have a soapy film on in our water, it could be a surfactant detergent, so we could have a leak, something going on. So if you want to see these charts in all their glory, get on the Texas Well Owner Network website. This chart is in the back of the Well Owner's Guide handbook. So feel free to look at that publication to get this information from it. Okay, the bacteria. Fecal coliform E. coli, again, indicator bacteria. They are risk from other disease-causing organisms. E. coli is from human and animal digestive systems. Iron, manganese, and sulfur-reducing bacteria are nuisances. They are not health issues. And I don't know how many folks out there do recommend shock chlorination, but we need to make sure that if people are shocking the wells, that they're doing it properly and not just opening the well up and pouring a little bleach down it. It's not a long-term solution, does not address the source of the contamination a lot of times. Anytime the well is open by driller or pump installer, we need to decontaminate. The bleach or the chemical that you're going to shock chlorinate with, that the drillers have, is probably a higher concentrate than what we can get at Walmart or HEB. So if the homeowner does shock a well, make sure that they are using correct procedures. That publication is on the Well Owner Network website. Some key information that you need to know about shocking a well is you do need to know the casing diameter. You need to know how much standing water is within that well so that you're using the appropriate amount of bleach. If you don't use enough, then you're really not going to take care of the situation. If you use too much, you could do some harm. So, you know, just like whenever you're putting chemicals out on your lawn or you're putting it out in the field, always read and follow label directions. This is what our label directions are going to tell us: standing water, casing, and then use appropriately. Okay, shock chlorination of stored water supplies. This is also a publication on that website. Many of the wells in the western part of the hill country produce 1 to 3 gallons per minute, or maybe lower than that. So a lot of people do have storage tanks. This time of year, whenever it's hot, and it causes our algae to grow, different things. So this is a publication I think is very beneficial in any place where you're going to have those stored water supplies. It tells us how to treat that stored above ground tank. So just for your information, you might want to look at that publication as well, have it available or put it on your website, because I know we got a lot of questions in Lakey about stored water supplies as well as treating wells for shock chlorination. Okay, if you have a positive test for E. coli bacteria, several steps that you should take. Just like whenever here in College Station or Bryan last night, we had a busted water main. First thing we saw in the news is water coming into sinks and into houses was discolored. So first thing, the city water supply, you as a water district, tell people boil all water intended for consumption. If we do see some issues, disinfect the well with chlorine, monitor the quality to ensure the problem does not recur. So very similar situation whenever you have a breach in your closed well system that a city is going to have in their closed loop system. So we need to try to identify the source, fix the problem, kill the bacteria and the viruses. So we're going to do that through chlorination, possibly ultraviolet lights if the system is set up for that, ozone or distillation. Okay, one thing we do see a lot of is activated carbon filters, or people tell us that they've got those on their sinks at home. The charcoal absorbs the contaminants. It's processed to make the large surfaces available for absorption of the chemical reaction. We need to make sure that that carbon is replaced regularly. This type of system is where I say we need to do a test prior to this and one coming through their activated carbon filter, because I've seen more positives come out of that filter than I did coming from the actual water well. So if we don't maintain this little thing right here on the sink properly, it will cause us more issues in the long run. Okay, reverse osmosis systems are very common and very effective in taking out the arsenics, the nitrates. The problem is we do have a point of use system. It can't overwhelm our septics if it's plumbed to go there. So we do have lots of discharge from this system. So not necessarily or more so a point of use than a whole household system. So that's what the problem pollutants that we can take out: arsenic, asbestos, chlorides, chlorines, manganese, mercury nitrates. So lots of things that we do see common in Texas groundwater. Reverse osmosis there at the sink may be a way to get rid of a lot of the contaminants, but it is a cost prohibitive for many situations. Okay, treating bacteria through UV lights. It disrupts the bacteria life cycle. It's a lot more effective and less intrusive than our chlorine. Low cost to operate, easy to maintain. There's no taste or odor. So something that people could look at. Low cost to operate. There is it's a substantial cost on the front side of it, but it does maintain itself over time. So it may be a very beneficial system in many situations across the state. Water treatment options, particle and microfiltration, activated carbon filters, reverse osmosis, disinfection, UV, just a list of the many options that we could have that you may see that you get questioned about. Okay, water treatment, we want to make sure that you do test wells. We're going to tell you that over and over again during our presentations annually for the bacterias. Locate those contamination sources if possible. Figure out if you have a breach in your system. Remember, closed loop system from the time water enters the pump to the time you open up the faucet should be a closed loop system. If you're having problems, figure out where the breach in that system is at. Check well construction. Inspect our septic, make sure we don't have leakage problems. Eliminate any sources of contamination, especially those easy ones within our well house. If we keep having problems after problems, we may need to consider drilling a new well. So that one's not a very cost-effective manner there. So point of entry systems, treat water as it enters a home, could be used for the whole house. Typically, those are very costly. A lot of our folks that are using our weekend homes don't want to spend that kind of money on it. Point of use installed underneath the faucet there in the kitchen. That is the most common kind of system that we recommend because that's very cost effective. Okay, abandoned wells can be pathways for pollutants. How many of y'all have seen this picture before where, pretty shallow wells, especially those alluvial type, putting stuff on the ground, the manures, it can easily penetrate the ground. That chicken litter can get into the ground quickly, especially if we have some substantial rainfalls, flows into the ground and goes to our hand pumps into our wells. So very common. Anybody see any problems with any of these pictures? Okay, I'm thinking that I've probably seen the one on the bottom right in many counties and many districts across the state. Remind your folks that that is not a proper well cap or a proper well plug, that can be moved out of the way. We all remember baby Jessica. She fell into a hole, with an 8 to 10 inch casing. So in Real County, if somebody falls down a well like that, we're not digging them out. In Atascosa County, where we've got some deep sands, we might be able to dig them out, but it's not going to be a pretty sight. So that is not a proper cap or plug. Let's make sure we are telling everybody to properly get those capped and plugged across the state. 3 criteria for capping a well. Cap must fit tightly, be properly sealed to prevent surface pollutants from entering the well. Cap should support 400 pounds to minimize the risk of a person falling into that well. To protect children and animals, the cap should not be easily removed by hand and not easy to lift. So the rock is not good. The piece of plywood on the ground, even worse. Okay. Who is the audience for the Texas Well Owner Network program? Rural property owners, farms and ranches make up about 90% of the folks that come to our programs. Domestic and livestock usage is about 90% of the usage for water wells that come to our programs as well. So we're seeing those rural and using it for their household. Okay, we do have a evaluation approach for these programs. We do a pre-test, post-test, and then we do a 1-year delayed questionnaire. So we do these evaluations every time we do a program in your county or in your district. We want you to look at the knowledge gain, satisfaction with the program, and intentions to change or adopt our best management practices. Okay, knowledge typically has increased by 33 points. Satisfaction with our program stands about 99%, so people love our program. Intentions to adopt the best management practices, test the water once a year, 85% say they are going to or have done that. Pump the septic system, 83%. Remove hazards from the well house, 95% say they don't have them or they were going to take care of that. And plugging or capping the abandoned wells on your property, 85% that see our program say that they're going to take care of that issue as well. Okay, the 1 year follow-ups, 90% of those needing to clean out the hazards from the well had done so. 74% that had wells near contamination sources had removed those sources of contamination. 36% of them had plugged or capped those unused or deteriorated wells. So again, we have the message out there and people are receptive to it and follow it. These are, again, the publications or a couple of the publications that we have available on the website, twon.tamu.edu. Please feel free to download, use them. Holler at me if you need some of these samples. Be happy to help you out. And with that, I will entertain any questions that you may have had, Julia.
All right, thank you so much, Joel. Perfect timing, by the way.
Hey.
Let's see. We had a hand raise. Omar Maldonado, you had your hand raised. Was that on purpose? If you did have a question that you wanted to ask Joel, will you please raise your hand again? And if not, I'll assume it was an accident. All right, Omar, I'm going to unmute you. See if that works. So Omar is with Guadalupe County. And so while he's seeing if he can, Omar, it looks like if you unmute yourself, you'll be able to chat with Joel.
How's that?
Yep,
There we
I
go.
hear you.
Okay, so I'm with Caroline. She's our intern at the Guadalupe County Groundwater Conservation District, so she has the question.
Okay.
I was going to ask where we can access that test, if there's a version of it online, or if we would have to come in person to be able to take that test. I just wanted to check it out to see, because I knew a lot of the information that was presented. I just wanted to check my knowledge.
Oh, for our evaluations?
Yes.
Send me an email and I will send you a copy of the evaluation. That way you can look at it and see what questions are asked and answered.
All right, thank you. I'll write down your email.
Okay, great.
Awesome. And let's see, while we wait to see if any other questions, I would just ask, next, any district wanting to pursue any higher level water quality stuff, whether it's a T1 workshop or doing their own stuff, what's the first step?
Okay, hang on. Repeat that question again. Sorry, the phone started ringing in the office.
No problem. What's the first step for a district wanting to do maybe a T1 workshop with you, or maybe look into running their own water quality setup at their district? What should the first step be?
So we deal with a lot of groundwater districts. We deal with a lot of extension offices. So I would say get on board with your extension offices would be one thing to do, and reach out to myself or John to do programs, and we will get you on our schedule as quick as we can. We are planning now for the fall and probably into next spring already. So just reach out and tell us that you have an interest in doing a program, and we will be happy to get you on our list of potentials. Typically what we try to do now is whenever we go to West Texas or we go to the Metroplex, we try to do multiple programs while we're in the area so that we get the most bang out of our dollar and out of y'all's dollars to get us up there. So it works good to do several programs in several counties, several districts, because that way we're getting lots of hits and lots of information out to a general area. So we love to come, we'll go anywhere in the state. We just have to have we have to make sure we have enough funds to get there. So we are on a grant dollar, and we're getting close to the end of this grant. So we're coming up with reapplying for next year. So just reach out to us and we will see where we can get you on the schedule and when we can get you on the schedule.
Okay, since you mentioned several districts, hitting several districts at once, would it be helpful for folks to talk to districts around them about partnering or timing before reaching out to you?
That's great. I mean, the more information that you can share, like when we did, we went up and did Panhandle, we hit the Panhandle Groundwater District, we were in Collinsworth County, we were in Deaf Smith, so we did a little bit of High Plains, we did a little bit of Panhandle District. Whenever we did South Texas, we were in the Duval County, we were in Brooks or Brush Country, we were with Kennedy with Andy's district, we were did DeWitt County. So we did multiple districts in multiple counties when we go do programs. We try to figure out, if we can hit a place, if we're going to far West Texas, we may stop in Sutton County going and coming to do a program, and we go on out and do Presidio and Brewster. So we try to utilize time and locations as good as possible to get as many great programs, and we'll bring our A game to you whenever we come.
Perfect. Well, I mean, your funders can't possibly say that you're wasteful with that.
We try not to be.
Taking advantage of every single stop. That's great. Well, I have asked in the chat box if there are any other questions. So if you have anything, speak now, or I was about to say forever hold your peace, but don't do that. Just reach out to Joel.
Reach out.
If you have trouble reaching Joel, reach out to me. I can connect you, but his information is here on the screen. Sure. I don't see any other hands up. Oh, it looks like we did just have another question come in. Oh, someone was asking if this will be able to rewatch or available to rewatch if they missed some of it. The answer is yes. This is all recorded. We've also got Joel's slides that we're gonna send out to y'all afterwards. Probably not today. Just wait for that tomorrow. I'll get that emailed out to y'all. And again, feel free to share this. This is one of the TAGD member benefits. We like putting on webinars every now and then just to provide y'all some information, no charge. So please share this with your boards, with your staff. And any last, I'm not seeing any more questions. So Joel, any parting words before we end here?
Just reach out to me if y'all got questions, if you think of something. We want to, like I say, we want to come everywhere. My goal before I get through doing this program is to hit every county in the state. I want to personally go to every one of your counties, every one of your districts, and do a program with you. So my goal is to hit everywhere. It just takes time to get there. So please be patient. If you want a program now, I can't do one, tomorrow, but it takes a little bit of time on our part, a little bit of time on y'all's part to get everything together. But we will work through it and we will get to your location as soon as we can.
Awesome. That is, do you have a map right now of how many counties you have been in yet? Do you have your progress tracking?
We have been in about 180 to 190 counties.
Not missing too many then, 254, so you're good.
The white counties are really my goal.
Yeah.
Because we've never been in a lot of those. With the water districts, John and Drew have been into a lot of counties, so we're getting there quickly, but we want to try to get everybody at least once.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Joel. This has been great information. We will have these slides available for everyone. And with that, I will go ahead and end this webinar. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your Tuesday and have a great week.
Thank you, Julia. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joel. Bye-bye.